Ready to go? All right, well, I'm gonna get started. Good afternoon, everybody. You are here for the Tunbridge Village Scoping City Product Alternatives meeting. I'm Rita Cito. I'm with the Tunbridge Automation Regional Planning Commission, and I am the town's project manager for the sidewalk. And we have Drew from PHP, they're our consultants. And also want to introduce Janet and Kevin Rose here, who's on our project committee. Janet, do you want to say a couple things?
So I did want to say a couple of things because I think I was louder, please. Is that 30 miles an hour? Yeah. So I just wanted to say a couple of things just because I think I was the one that kind of instigated this whole thing after a planning commission meeting and hearing about the Tunbridge Improvement Society, which existed, 80 years ago, 80 years ago or so. And they got together, members of the community got together and they got the library, purchased the land for the library. And they also built the sidewalk that ran from Cottage to General Store. And, I just moved to the village fairly recently, although I've lived in town a while. And I noticed, people walking, you have to walk in the road, basically. And I just went to the select board when I heard about the money available for the building study, the grant money. And the select board approved the matching funds. And after that, through Two Rivers, who held with Rita, and then Drew from VHB was contracted to do the feasibility study. So we met, a few of us, Kevin Rose was there, and we walked through town and we pointed out the things that we thought were of interest, being able to get safely across the street by the town hall, safely across the street from the library to the post office area. And especially with all the activity at the library, the after school program, which last year had, I believe, about 40 students. Those students were also walking between the library and the town hall. So I just was feeling like it might be a good idea to think about having a sidewalk again in the future. I think that's right now. It's just looking at what the AP came up with for ideas of what a sidewalk could look like.
Take it away.
Yes, please.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Drew Gingras. I'm with PHB. We're consultants based out of Rutland, Montpelier, South Burlington. I myself work out of our South Burlington office, and I just thought I'd run through what we're going to talk through tonight. As we just heard from Rita and Janet, the next sheet is going to kind of summarize the full project team. From there, we're going to share with you kind of where we've been and where we're heading from here and the progress we've made in between. We're going to get into this discussion of the conceptual alternatives that we've assembled based on kind of a review of existing conditions of the project area, which happens to be just right in front of us, which is always wonderful. And then what we heard at our local concerns meeting, which was last October. There's been a few project delays, but we're back up and running to keep things going. I'm going to summarize for you our findings in those evaluation matrices of the alternatives, and then I'd like to open it up for an open discussion. My intention will be to get through this presentation as quickly as possible, be as thorough as possible, but really what I want to do is get to a question and answer, hear from you all, hear what your thoughts are on the alternatives. I know we've had some boards up around town for folks to comment on. My one request when we get to that is to please be kind, please be respectful. We're all here on our own time, volunteering our time, so let's be kind to each other, to the project team members as we get into any discussions, and then we'll close out the project with just kind of where we go from here. So with that, again, Rita is the municipal project manager, the MPM for the project, assisting the town. Our town project team is made up of Mariah, Janet, and Kevin, who are here tonight. Mariah was unfortunately not able to be here, and then I myself, again, with VHB, am supported by our project advisor, Jen Conley, who many of you might have seen at the first public meeting. I was unable to attend that. I had just had a son who had been 5 days old. I'm not sure successfully got out of the house that night that night last year. But I'm also supported by Elizabeth, who was here last October as well.
Can you tell us what VHB stands for?
Oh, it's terribly boring. It's the initials of our 3 founders.
Okay.
Vanessa,
All right.
Hannon, and Russell.
Okay.
Founded the company 44 years ago.
I was just
Yeah.
curious if it was Vermont something.
The
and I
V,
hadn't
the
heard of it.
V, having in the
Yeah.
Vermont office, the V always throws off a lot of people, because you do think it's like Vermont something, but no, just. Three gentlemen who started a former company. Yeah, so, yeah, but just a quick recap of. What we've done, where we're at and where we're heading. So previously, as I mentioned, that local concerns meeting last October. Since then, we've done a lot of looking at the existing conditions, the information we looked at along the corridor kind of includes traffic data, what's the speed data out there, what are the traffic counts? Are there any natural resource, historical resource, archaeological resource concerns along the corridor? We are going to be potentially doing any sort of future design and construction. What does that look like? What do we need to be mindful of? What are those impacts? What is the right of way along the corridor? And all of that information we use to inform our eventual conceptual alternative development. Because when we're developing these ideas for a potential sidewalk or shared use path or crossings or connections, what we're doing there is we're measuring those against what we've heard from the community. And then how the site would be impacted by a potential project as it exists today. And so just where we go from here, we're looking at the development of the report based on what we hear today. Hopefully out of this meeting, we'd love to gather just a feel of a preferred alternative for the project. We will then present it to the select board to get their buy-in and approval of our study, and eventually we'll deliver the final scoping report, which will be the summary of all of the items, including the recommended alternative. So why are we here? The project purpose and project needs on the next page, these are what I like to call a North Star. So when you set out on a scoping study, you need to figure out what you're doing. What is the purpose of this project? And in this case, the Tunbridge Village Scoping Study seeks to identify and prioritize improvements for pedestrian safety, accessibility, and connectivity within Tunbridge Village and among its many destinations. And this is very much in line with what the 2021 Tunbridge Town Plan set forth for walking and accessibility in the area, which is to provide pedestrians with safe areas to travel within the villages of Tunbridge and North Tunbridge, such as sidewalks, crosswalks, and bike paths. So this project, as Jan mentioned, has a little bit of history. It also really ties into aforementioned predetermined goals of the town to produce and potentially hopefully one day build areas for pedestrians to safe through town, not just by private motor vehicle, but also by walking and potentially bicycling. Project needs, so these are kind of the bulleted list of needs that ultimately supplement the project purpose statement to improve corridor safety, to enhance mobility opportunities, and to seek out solutions to reduce traffic speeds. As we heard, as soon as Janet started to speak, a motorcycle go by, and motorcycles are generally loud, but I don't have a built-in radar gun in my eyeballs, but I think that motorcycles are probably going a little bit quicker than 30 miles an hour. And so we're going to introduce the infrastructure for pedestrians to traverse the village and cross the street. I think we want to be sensitive to speeds and make sure that the speeds at which people are traveling through town align with an area that is going to have vulnerable users, i.e. pedestrians, traveling through. So with that, a quick recap of the project area. So we're starting down here at Potash Hill Road, going up past Spring Road and then down to the bridge over the river and the connection up to Recreation Road here. Couple highlights, couple areas of interest, the Tunbridge store, the public library, the town office, access to the fairgrounds are all things that we see as destinations, opportunities for connections from this network and value add. And before I get any further, I'm gonna quickly recap the existing conditions before I get into the alternatives. I just want to share the intention of this project as it's defined as a scoping study. So this is not even in construction, this is not we're sticking shovels in the ground tomorrow. This is what can we do to improve walking in this area? So the ideal outcome of a study like this is to select a preferred alternative that can then, if determined by the town and the state, to be viable, seek funding for the potential design and construction. The end result of this particular project that we're here talking about tonight is not a construction project. It is the hope of a selected alternative to potentially design and construct. So as we look at just a quick recap of the existing conditions out there, namely for existing pedestrian infrastructure, how are people currently getting around town? It could be generous to say there are existing sidewalks, they're in a bit of a state of disrepair. As Janet said, most people just choose to walk in the road, especially if you have a mobility aid device. This sidewalk right here is not traversable in a wheelchair, potentially not by a cane or walker either. If you're pushing a stroller as well, I'm not sure that's going to be terribly user friendly, but it might be a better option than pushing a stroller in traffic within 2 to 4 feet of cars that are traveling 30 miles an hour or in excess of that. So there are no formal crossings between the village either. We have destinations on different sides of the road, the food pantry, the town hall, the library, the general store, zigzagging as we go down the corridor there and where folks are trying to get, fairgrounds, of course, as well. Another critical part of this study is going to be looking at how the corridor is utilized for parking. There's informal on-street parking along the entire project area. Obviously, this evening aside and how you all got here and parked and came in, before most folks arrived, there was still a handful of cars parked along the shoulder. So there's kind of informal allowed permitted on-street parking. There's also a few off-street parking locations, the town offices, the church right over here, the community center, and the postal USPS as well. There's kind of an formal pull off. So with that, I'm going to jump into the alternatives. Just a quick show of hands. How many folks have seen this giant, very colorful board in front of me here tonight?
Excellent.
It's gonna make my job a lot easier. So I'm gonna show you kind of zoomed in clippings of each of the things you've seen here and hopefully add a little bit of context to each of those. So I'm gonna step through. We have 3 alternatives. Alternative 1 and alternative 3 are very similar, with the exception of alternative 3 basically represents an extension of alternative 1. So as we get into things, without further ado, so again, it's wonderful that the vast majority of you all have seen this. I'm still, for those that haven't, and then for those that have, I want a little bit more context. I'm still going to step through what we're seeing with each of these, but here's Potash Hill Road, kind of the start of our project site. And right off the bat, we have our very first proposed crosswalk, and this gets at kind of serving a multi-purpose need. So not only does the crosswalk provide a connection between town hall and across the street to the length of sidewalk that is being conceptualized along the east side of the roadway, but it also kind of provides a gateway into the village. So oftentimes if you're driving, especially as you come up this hill, you're in the village, the roadway changes. Obviously the buildings are really close to the road. You may or may not see someone, but if you see these warning signs that are going to say pedestrians ahead, and I realize there's one right out there right now that says pedestrians next quarter mile. If we put a couple signs up that says pedestrians ahead and then potentially a crosswalk right here, that does is kind of establish what's referred to loosely as a gateway into the village. And that says, okay, people are walking here. So the very first thing you see when you come up from the south as you come into town, big warning signs that say people are here, people are moving around. Please be mindful of the speed limits and please be respectful of pedestrians if you see them. And so what's being proposed along the east side of the road here is a 6-foot, what would be concrete sidewalk. And in the areas of these crossings, what we've done is we've quote unquote necked down the street. And so that is kind of further encouraging speed management. So the roadway is inherently narrower here at the point of the crossing, and then it widens out to continue to allow that informal parking along the corridor. And what that does, not only here, not only does it narrow the amount of distance that you as a pedestrian have to cross, but when you are queuing to cross, it inherently puts you more in sight of the driver, so they know there's a better chance of yielding. As they're approaching from the south or from the north, you're much more in there, what's called a cone of vision, before you cross the road. Continuing north, this cross section remains fairly unchanged. It's a 6-foot sidewalk. It's a grass buffer of variable width, never less than 4-foot minimum. And then adjacent to that, again, is that striped formalized shoulder, which kind of better defines that on-street parking width of 7 feet, which is typically the standard minimum for on-street parking. As we approach the public library, we again have another crosswalk that, again, gate posted with signage facing both directions, alerting motorists of the potential for crossings to connect folks using the sidewalk network to the public library, and then continuing north to the post office, maintaining that off-street, kind of informal on-street parking rather right in front of the post office, and then concluding just south of the general store with alternative 1. So again, alternative 1, primarily a 6-foot concrete sidewalk, a grass buffer of variable width that allows for maintaining the 7-foot width for on-street parking. And in the areas of, I should have mentioned this, the areas of those crosswalks, we would propose concrete curbing. Just to kind of more formalize that area, more set it in place, and potentially even just give it a little bit more prominence and really define that edge of roadway with the curb at those areas of crossing. But just two very small areas of that. Moving on to alternative 2, is we're looking at a 8 to 10 foot paved shared use path. And so this would not only allow for pedestrians to travel, but also in case there's any bicyclists in the area. The consensus around the project team is that the impacts that this may cause might not be worth the overall benefit when you're kind of looking at the cost, the benefit of a shared use path versus a sidewalk. But we wanted to take a look at it anyway, see how it might impact resources, right of way, how it might benefit user groups. So we've laid this out. And so again, it's very similar to the previous concept, but it extends in this case 4 feet wider than the previous alternative 1. And excuse me, same here, but then in some cases where we might see an opportunity to mitigate an impact to a utility pole, we would propose to narrow the path to 8 feet, still allowing 2-way walking travel and 2-way biking travel. Again, a very similar cross section going down the way, narrowing where we might impact a utility pole to just mitigate that impact and avoid it entirely. Same crossing locations and same endpoint down here at the general store with the 10-foot path traveling the majority of the way, narrowing it again to mitigate any utility impacts. Alternative 3 is vast majority the same as alternative 1. So to save ourselves some time, this is the exact same, this is the exact same. But what alternative 3 does is kind of better connect to North Tunbridge, better connect to the rest of the kind of area, to Recreation Road, to the Spring Street Bridge, and bring people across 110 again down here at the general store. So we kind of have kind of an informal area here. There's obviously the porch, the access to the store, and the ability to walk kind of through here. And then we propose a crossing here. We understood it from the project team that there is a need to maintain on-street or rather off-street parking in this area due to that being used by residents. And so we had initially kind of had the sidewalk coming straight through here, but then we're made aware of that need, and so we kind of adjusted our alignment. And it looks like before the bank really dives down into the river, that we could still fit in that sidewalk in a reasonable and feasible way. And then we come across Spring Street, continuing north and eventually connecting into the existing sidewalk network ahead of the bridge. So those are the 3 alternatives. And to summarize them quickly, we kind of plug everything into what we call evaluation matrices, and we highlight these based on kind of a red means no change, no real benefit. White is just more of a descriptive or kind of a null benefit, and then green, light green, dark green, light green, slightly positive, darker green, more positive. So when we look at what we're considering in this, and I have three tables like this, when we look at, in this case, multimodal and traffic considerations, we're looking at bicycle access, pedestrian safety, and vehicle safety. And pedestrian safety, it's easy to see if we're providing continuous pedestrian facilities along the whole way, intentionally putting in crossings that have built-in countermeasures to hopefully slow traffic speeds. We see that as a blanket improvement for pedestrian safety across the board. Vehicle safety as well, we think with the bump outs, the potential for the bump outs at the crossing areas, and those neck downs that would bring in some natural traffic calming. And improve conditions for drivers inherently, because hopefully folks will be going slower, and inherently improving conditions for any walkers and bikers seeking to use the potentially new facility. And then bicycle access, we put this in here, we didn't hear too much of a demand for bicycling outside of the ability to utilize the existing shoulder and potentially utilize a formalized shoulder in a selected alternative. But we did want to just call out that the shared use path would provide a greater benefit to any bicyclists in the area over the concrete sidewalk. This is a lot of words, but most of them are no, which is a good sign. So this is looking at all manner of impacts to generally natural resources, historical resources, archaeological resources, and kind of known permitting requirements for the state of Vermont. And so we look at, the addition of new impervious surface, if we're putting new concrete out there, is there any impact to the existing stormwater infrastructure? How will the stormwater flow onto or off of this facility? Will it have any negative impacts to its surrounding? Are there floodplains in the area? Are there wetlands in the area? Fish and wildlife considerations, rare, threatened, and endangered species. Fortunately, for a lot of what we've seen, there's not a lot of impact to any of these considerations. And I think that's primarily because the project area is fairly developed, and so those things have either already been impacted or mitigated. The one thing we did do, we had an archaeologist perform what's called an archaeological resource assessment, and they did find that there are archaeological considerations present, and so we would want to, if we were to move forward in design, there would be further investigation be required. So that was the big one to come out of that, and then obviously right of way as well. What's out front here along 110 is called 4-rod right of way. It's about 66 feet of right of way, and we would imagine, frankly, probably none, or if not extremely minor, what are called temporary impacts. So construction impacts, which is where, in the case of a sidewalk being constructed, there might be a slight cut in an existing lawn that would then be reseeded, topsoil and reseeded at the end of construction and restored to its existing state, representing a temporary impact during construction, but not a permanent long-term impact. The shared use path has similarly a bit more potential for minor temporary impacts because of its slightly wider width, but at the end of the day, we're not any concerned about the potential for permanent right-of-way takes, as they're called, for impacts. Wrapping this up, what would each of these alternatives do for the kind of community character, for meeting the project purpose and need? All of these, again, I don't think we would be doing our job if we were considering alternatives that didn't meet the project purpose and need. So we say blanket statement, all of these do meet the project purpose and need. They also very importantly conform to the regional transportation plan. The fact that the 2021 town plan calls for improvements to transportation systems for vulnerable users, for pedestrians. This is in further pursuit of that. Economic impacts, we wanted to call out that if there is a new sidewalk, it would need to be maintained. Maintenance agreements can be made down the road, but it's definitely a consideration that we wanted to at least call out here. And then community character and aesthetics. You see a lot of small towns and villages seeking out improvements for walkers and bikers, and I think that inherently kind of brings back in this idea that these village centers they're community centers. They're not just meant to be driven through, they're meant to be stopped in and walk around and enjoy. And so we see improvements to all of those elements with the potential implementation. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, only to answer questions. So thank you all for listening, and I welcome questions. Sorry. The project area for this study began at Potash Hill Road and continues north.
People on the road, they're inviting people to the fairgrounds all summer, and the access to the village, we really have not that is safe. So having people walking on the safe part of the road, getting onto the safe part,
Good idea.
Yeah, you want people to be safe, maybe not safe, would start where thousands of people at a time are at festivals during the summer. That the only way to get up here is outside or on a hill that elders and people with strollers or handicapped anyways.
Who owns the individual section of the, in front of the individual homes? Is there a legal liability, in our town, the homeowner is responsible for the sidewalk in front of the house? And if there's a slip and fall, they are liable. Then it's maintenance, question, and where's that, who's gonna remove snow and everything else? And how's that gonna be paid for, and the budget for equipment for that, and somebody you can do that. In addition, I had a nice meeting with the sheriff a week ago. I was first out on Springer, and crossing over 110 down to my house is extremely treacherous. So I mean, a huge part, actually, my parking lot, which is directly across from the store. And so I sat with the sheriff, and we had a contest, because they are trained to look at traffic and accurately estimate their speed just by looking at it. So when they have to tap the test, and if they get it wrong, they have to keep doing it over again until they get it very accurate. And then they sat there and watched the radar and people coming through town. I had a chat with Janet recently, and I have 10% suggestion. And if anybody here goes to Bethel, as soon as you go into town, there's a little radar sign that says your speed is. And a lot of people, myself included, don't have a really good feel for how fast they're actually going. 25 is pretty slow. Not on a private surface. Anyway. I made a couple of suggestions, wanted to have two near signs, one in either end of the town. He said they can be purchased, so they can put in sales quite effectively or quite affordably. So, outlay is not going to be outrageous. He also suggested that we put a large, convex mirror further to the apex of that turn. The one is there now, it's pretty useful, pretty impossible to see somebody coming around the turn. And he said, for example, large vehicles appear to be going faster than they actually are. But like I said, we have a little concept. Just sitting there watching the radar and some appear to be going really fast, and they work. And some will go really fast. So those are two, I think, important improvements.
I think that's the most important. I sit on the general every day and I'm scared for my patrons. I'm scared for somebody opening the door and getting out of the car, backing out, pulling in, crossing the street. It's very serious. Can I just respond quickly about the sign? So that's already in the work of the town. So that's I spoke to Mariah about that, and she told me that has already been figured out, that we were waiting for the results. We have to get together about the feasibility study and hear what people have to say. And I think everybody is in agreement that those signs do work and they are helpful. And that is something that the town is planning on doing, but they also have to, from what I understand from Rita, that because it's a state road, we can't just put those signs up. We have to,
You have to apply for an access permit through V-Trans.
The old distribution speed, the 30, 25, probably all the way north of the bridge. Because I mean, what's blind corners there, South is not as bad, but it has a bit of a crest, it's pretty wide. And it's 40 almost all the way to the bid, pretty much where we're talking about. And then it's 30, which 30 units per town is, pretty quick.
Has the town ever asked the state to lower the speed limit through the village before?
Well, I did,
Yeah,
yeah, so that was just changed from 35 to 30. And I don't, I think that was based on the traffic study that was done. And, what V-Trans saw as an appropriate speed. That was my understanding. I mean, I listened to the whole hours of every town feeling everyone's feel about what they wanted.
I'm sure that maybe it's probably through the time, but with this sort of project, thinking under essentially, any one of these options. I mean, that would 30 miles an hour would then not make sense. I feel like that's gotta be, part of the very next week, people want to parallel park the park off road here, the park in the line corner, well, 30 is speed limit 30. Not gonna, so really reducing the speed overall through town.
How do we reduce it? Like, reduce it, but then people don't follow the rules.
Well, I mean, there's, maybe an action goal, which is 25, if people understand what 25 is for bill, I think versus, they 30, especially where the signs are, right, as it kind of started to back and that went well out, of, 4 mile, 100 meters outside of town. I mean, otherwise, any of these things wouldn't really be beneficial to slow, very high speed for them.
Inviting pedestrians to be on the street, but people are flying and doesn't make any sense.
Well, it does seem that the third plan, I think, to the extent that you have these choke points that you think are effective for slowing down traffic, having one north of the Tunbridge store. I mean, obviously, there are potential access issues and expanding project costs, but that to me seems like it makes sense as a way of slowing people when they really come into the village, which starts at the very least with the village store. And I'm sure that there are people who are at, like, even north of Spring Road who'd like to wait and see things slow down.
While you have that screen up, alternative 3, I just have a question about, you had something flagged for floodplain, potential floodplain issue in the.
I think the benefit there is that we are not, oh, sorry.
Yeah, you had that.
Yeah.
It was a
I think that,
Where was that?
Maybe erosion for the.
yeah, I think it's just kind of being sensitive to, the connection up here, which is at an elevation, I don't think it would be the. Inherent, but I think maybe potentially down here, we could be within what's called the effective river corridor. So that would just be constructed within that, and I don't think it's necessarily a concern. But it's just something we could potentially, that's more of a permitting, if we want to make sure we check that off. I think it's,
It does
Sorry?
concern me because I own.
sorry,
I said, it does concern me because I own that area where the cars park across the street from the store.
yeah,
I own.
You're basically,
But 30 from the center line.
yeah. So this line right here. Okay. So anything in between here and here is owned by the state.
Even where that sidewalk is out there now, there's nothing underneath that. And this parking lot, there's nothing out there.
Sorry,
And so where you have a sidewalk on this, hangs,
yeah,
parking lot there, I've been clearing the brush, been out there today clearing the brush, there's nothing. Where you have that sidewalk right now, nothing.
that washed out.
It's not, there's the air.
Oh, yeah. Well, what we're going off of when we laid this out is statewide contours, and so the kind of drops are not when you see that red dot according to that information.
Yeah.
But it could be worth looking into a little bit further if we're gonna be
Yeah.
looking at something down
That is
there.
a place where there's been erosion problems during flooding, even though it's so high.
Could we maybe do hands? Sorry, we're getting a lot of people talking over. I just want to be respectful of who is speaking at the time. So, ma'am.
So, well, one question I had while you were going over all of this is like, did your team like go out and test and measure all these things, or is it just from like aerial photos or, because, exactly, because of what you're saying. That whole area there in Irene, it was one of Tunbridge's big impacts from Irene when the river flooded, even though it's so high, I don't know what they
It
call it.
undercut.
And part of Route 110 collapsed. And so where that area is, there's all the years I used to park there. I used to be really worried because it was kind of soft towards the back. So I was just curious, like, when we're looking at alternatives, has that kind of like engineering work been done? Like, have people looked at that?
Generally not part of the scope, at this stage, but
But would they
if,
before they make a decision or build or,
of course,
okay,
to be,
that was my
to be
question
straightforward.
related to your
Absolutely, yeah,
presentation.
so.
Yeah.
Future projects, an alternative is selected, we're gonna build a sidewalk. If there are any areas of concern over what could be subsurface, we would do what are called borings along the alignment of the
Okay,
proposed
okay,
corridor.
That's exactly.
And we would find out, so
What I'm
we would drill down probably about, anywhere from 12 to 20 feet.
Okay.
To see what it's looking like down there and the stability of the side slope there, and if it was deemed unsuitable, then we would, change course.
New plan, yeah.
Yeah, new plan, exactly, yeah.
I think meetings like this, maybe microphone. I haven't seen anything here on parking. How many spaces are we willing to remove? Compared to what we have now. And then the third. Saying how many parking spaces will make.
I think we were definitely very sensitive when we were looking at, the parking, and we had originally. This is an interesting, a trade-off discussion where we heard traffic speeds. Okay, what do you do to slow traffic speeds on a road that's too fast? You narrow the road. So the first alternative we actually did, we proposed that this drag strip from all the way up to the shoulder to the absolute minimum width required. Because what that's gonna do is that's gonna suck in the travel way so much that a driver would feel uncomfortable driving at the speed they are now. We then met with the project team, with Jeff, Kevin, with Rita, with Mariah, and they said, that's not gonna work here, taking away all the parking. We said, okay, well, there's a trade-off discussion. If we narrow the road, we get slower speeds. If we don't narrow the road, we maintain parking. The project team made the decision that we need to maintain as much parking as feasible because of its use along the corridor. So. Yeah, yes, so if I may, so in the areas of these crossings, because those are gonna be points where users are going to be crossing the road. It would be terribly unsafe to suggest parking in front of a crosswalk, because you can't see a pedestrian waiting to cross. And you can't see a car if you are a pedestrian waiting to cross. That's what's called a sight line. We want to keep that sight line clear for the person crossing and the driver coming up, so that they're able to actually see a pedestrian waiting to cross the road. So in these alternatives, you can see basically in advance of this crosswalk and in advance of this crosswalk are the only two places where it would be legitimately unsafe to maintain parking because it would inherently block the sight of somebody potentially crossing the street. Down here, we were very sensitive to maintaining as much parking in front of the general store as we could and maintaining parking over here.
Where the crosswalk is on both sides of the road is our major parking.
Yeah, well, especially on the store side, when we take everything we have on that.
I wanna be sensitive to language. When we say take, this is an alternative. So we are hearing, I am hearing that this alternative is not favorable to you. Because even though it establishes a safe point for people to walk, which you did mention was a priority, it removes a potential parking spot. So that would amount to about, I don't know how people park angularly or parallel pull in, so I can't say, but. In terms of area of space, that amounts to about one space for that area. But if people are pulling in angles, then you could potentially be able to get 2 or 3 cars in there. And so that would be, I'm hearing from you that would be unfavorable. So that to me suggests for you, alternative 3 could potentially be completely out of board. And we wouldn't want to continue the sidewalk north at all.
What about we take a vote on
Well, yeah, no, yeah. Again, respect, we're gonna get through everybody.
Go back to, where the library crosswalk is, please.
Right here.
So I'm the one who does cooking. I walk from the library, I walk down here. I make the kids walk in a single file. And we are well within that white line. Yellow
Yeah.
line, white line. And I'm always watching them. I would hate to have to go from the library down to the town hall and have to cross, or back, and have to cross the road 4 times. These kids are safe with me because I'm always watching them. So don't think we have to have the crosswalk and the sidewalk because of me. Or the kids. Because the kids are doing what I say. Being safe.
Am I understanding that? Am I understanding that you don't want any alternative?
Correct.
Okay.
So where the pedestrian crossings are, or you said there's curbing on those
Could
areas?
potentially be curbing.
Okay, but otherwise that would be the only areas for curbing.
Correct.
Because my concern with Hank also saying who would maintain these. When the state comes through and leans back the snow, they bury our sidewalks, those of us that have sidewalks right now.
Yeah.
And there's no possible way to keep those open if they're. And they've also, at the library, they've leaned back so far, it's undermined and caused the sidewalk to heave. So there's also, even with the 4-foot buffer long, it's, there's the
Yeah.
potential for a lot of damage.
And the disregard, the V-Trans district expressed concerns about winter maintenance, which is part of every single project. And
Yeah.
and anytime you want to, and it's a double-edged sword. You need a wide road to plow, with a wide road, you get 45 miles an hour to your village center.
And also too, with the parking, this, if there's no curbing except possibly at the crosswalks, people are gonna park in the grass like they do already. I mean, there used to be a sidewalk in front of Parsonage. In that area long, that was dug up a few years ago. And, you know, so it's not like you can't park there unless it's posted. that you can't. So, and you're gonna lose 10 spaces max, and I'll be able to see you get out on the driveway. So.
Sir,
Mr. Jim Sherlock, if you can move your, up to the bridge, brief. I have 2 questions. Number one is, in your study, did you determine how many people actually walk that? Walk from the bridge to the store on that side where you have a proposed sidewalk?
and folks currently would use the road to walk to here.
No, let's see, you've got, go
over here.
Go more toward the bridge.
Yeah.
There's an existing sidewalk there, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
the existing
on
sidewalk.
the bridge.
And
And
right,
then there.
right there.
Okay, in your, my second point, number one, I'm the only one who walks. You're spending $100,000 on a sidewalk, nobody's gonna use it unless it's a population that's low in north. Much like that. My next question is, did you measure the distance between the road and my house is at house and barn, right there,
Right here?
14 feet from the road right now to my front porch. How are you gonna get a 6-foot sidewalk in there with all the alternative stuff without having to take out part of my house? Plus, I need access to my parking and access to my garage, and the sidewalk doesn't provide for that.
Well, we would, if this were to be the selected alternative, this would be flush through here, so we would by no means be blocking any access to private property.
Okay,
That's not a thing that happens. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is a study. Want that to be clear. This is not a construction project. This is a study. We are evaluating alternatives. Your feedback, we've come here to engage with you. I've heard your feedback that you don't want this because you believe that you're the only person that walks here.
yeah, then a couple of people walking their dogs and,
We had a couple other hands go up and say they walk there as well, I guess.
dogs just walk in the front yard. Yeah, people use my front yard.
But as far as you're concerned about the proximity to your house,
Right.
you know, it is a 6 foot sidewalk, I think if it, and you said there's 14 feet, we were sensitive, as you can see, not to buffer this, because then we moved it would have pushed even further, again, within the state right away, but near your house. But I think we were sensitive here to curb that up to minimize the potential impact off of the road, in this alternative. But as far as, impacts to your home, I mean, if the project were to move into design, that would be, you know, one of the most complicated concerns. We seek to mitigate and minimize any and eliminate impacts on revenue, especially structure. The project wouldn't be built if it's going to impact structure if it was determined in engineering design. This is just a study. It's I'm not sure who was up first, so. So I haven't heard from you, sir, if you don't mind.
Yep, no problem.
How wide is the existing sidewalk?
It's hard to even define because it's such a state of repair.
Say probably 3 foot. And
Between
why?
3 and 4.
Visible, probably 3 feet when it was constructed, probably.
It's not much. I don't think.
Well, I'm not saying it's currently 5 feet, I'm saying when it was constructed, it was probably 4 or 5 feet. Okay,
So why 6 feet? Is that an ADA requirement?
yeah, standards change over time, and so 6 feet is determined the minimum width that you would need if 2 people were to be in mobility aid devices to be able to excessively pass each other.
Can we go back to the library?
Yeah.
Crosswalk there. So basically, if I'm looking at that, where that next down, you're gonna eliminate probably 90% of your parking. So
Sorry?
You're gonna, by necking that down and tracking that over, especially if it's curving, you're gonna eliminate probably 90% of your parking for the library currently.
90%, does the parking have allotted spaces?
No, they don't, but that's the area that they currently.
It's all parallel. I think the netting is just that one little section right in front.
Yeah, so it's just here, it's just
Yeah,
here.
it's right there and then across the road, which.
So this is all still here, so this is one, this would accommodate, this would take up about 1 parking spot. And this would be 2,
Yeah,
so I don't know if I call it 90%, but I guess to put
3 or 4 on opposite side of the road.
put numbers here would probably be about 2 or 3, and then 1 spot here, so you're looking at 3 or 4 total parking.
Yeah, that's what I did that.
I came to the last meeting and there were some really good points raised. I don't know. I saw some of you there, but I think there were some others who aren't here tonight who brought up points of people who don't come and walk in the village because it's unsafe. So studying who walks there now, I think is kind of like a risky way to look at this and eliminates a lot of people. There were people at that meeting who said they were caregivers of people with mobility aids, parents with small children, parents with babies in strollers who just never come to the village, don't even get their stroller out of the car, don't walk at all. Our kids, when they were little, used to have a bus stop by corner rail and would get dropped off at the store in the morning and had to walk and navigate that corner. Just last week, Thursday, I did a loop around the Mill Bridge. I walked right through that area where you're talking about having a sidewalk. So I think there are people who might be trying to use it and we don't see them. And I think there are people who might come and use it more and we'd see more people using it and accessing the village, which I think is part of the point of making it walkable and safe.
Thank you. Yeah,
I would support that. Because most new road space is filled up with cars. And then it is filled. And I think that this is potentially a very charming village, more so than it is now. It will enhance the walking areas that you've been working on. And the houses across from the extended area in the third alternative, across from where Gordy's office is, are charming houses. And if the extension is done, third alternative, and somehow they are included and brought into the idea of the village, it would become a whole that really becomes much more than it is now.
Thank you.
I feel like, I'm pretty sure I understand this, so. And this is based off, I hear like people concerned about parking, and when I driven to town, coming down the park. I noticed there were a lot of people parking in the places you guys pointed out, sort of, and in, towards these buildings, right where the crosswalks are. But I think this plan of fourth, anywhere between these bump outs is probably gonna be more conducive to parallel parking than and used that way than it is now. It's almost never really used except for like when there's something, large scale, like night probably going on with more parking there. I think it's just sort of maybe moving to where we want, but not necessarily using any parking spots. But that's my interpretation, like where like it's not bumped out, there's gonna be on the shoulder, park on, then grass, then side.
Yes.
I just want, one of my concerns on this would be that corner. That lot's got wider than narrow. Never met, trail trucks on that corner. There's not much room to dance. So we wanna, I mean, that'd be my concern, that walk has gotta give more space rather than less.
And there's is it the gravel plant or quarry up in Chelsea that you get some truck traffic down from?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
If you move to option one, or go to the other end of the south end of the village. The tractor trailer trucks come up 110, and you can't, or come down on the Stratford Road, and you can't make the turn to go that direction. They come down to this area and back up to Potash, and then go back to town and head in the right direction.
Okay. It's now.
Yeah, I'm in favor of, the third option because, I think we all have to admit that the town is growing. It will be growing as traffic will be increasing. Since COVID, we know a whole lot, more interest has been made in this part of the world, by people wanting to leave cities and warmer climates. So I think we really have to look forward to say, okay, this is to look at the situation as it is now is not really realistic because we have to look 50 years ahead in 25 years. There's going to be a lot more people driving on these roads in town and using 110 and state highway. The other thing is that option 3 allows at least some access to the rec fields and to that part of town. Right now, really, for kids to ride a bike and walk to the rec fields is.
It's still across 110,
Pardon me?
it's still across 110, yeah.
Yes, I know, but it could be, but it's a visible place there. There's a possibility that there's more possibility than now. So that's why I'm in favor of that. I think that expanding north is going to be sooner or later. And in fact, all of this is really sooner or later, because I don't think we can avoid the increased traffic that's going to be coming into town.
So 2 hands right here.
No. Expanding north, pretty early, up to what we call market is possible. You have a speed bank on one side, you widen that road, it's gonna be Matt and Jim Williams. There is no room.
I think this is all fantastic forward thinking. That alternative compared to adding a sidewalk on the south side, and our president of the Tunbridge Fairgrounds is here and invites thousands of people. Beginning of June, thousands of people. July, beginning of July, thousands of people down. On and on, every month of the summer into the last festival is the Sheep and Wool at the beginning of October. Thousands of people down there. They need to sidewalk. More than that needs a sidewalk, in my belief, and I enjoyed the forward thinking. But I don't think we should put pedestrians on the street until we slow the traffic down.
The reliability issue, building crosswalk and not call beds. Like, is that done? You can save the parking spot, but it is going to parking spots.
Yeah, it's not so much a liability issue. You wouldn't need to, I guess to answer the question, you wouldn't need to build the bump out, but you would still need to restrict parking in advance of the crossing. At least 20 feet
So
is,
if you have a crosswalk and you have to permit it parking, it's there.
immediately in front of it. Yeah, you can't block where people are trying to block the sight lines, and it's a safety issue. It's not handled here.
Yeah.
Sir.
So, yeah, it's interesting to have this south end slide back, and I want to hear your comments about the safety here, which, you know, is often just not seen and not addressed in this, so, and it does seem to me like the most comprehensive, forward-thinking approach is protect the whole village from end to end in terms of speed and protect people that are walking the thing. So I'll just, well, I'm not good, I guess, is saying, I support this kind of concept being extended to the south end, to that next access to the fairgrounds, and having some sort of crossing choke point there. Actually, it might not be a crossing, because it might be coming up here. You know, I realize, I understand the issues with, you know, potential encroachment and the concern for that, but if there are places where there's effectively already that space allowed for, it seems like it's worth looking at. So if you treat the whole village from that access point to the fairgrounds, all the way to the bridge on the north side, that seems to me like a really promising, long solution.
Sounds like we need alternative 4.
Continuing with that conflict, is it possible to feel some of the bank on the cemetery side?
No.
Okay, thanks, ladies.
Have you walked down there and looked at it? Yeah. Walk on that, walk on- I walk-
Well, you get, there's an embankment on the fair side. Well, the only place that you stand and go.
So you take out the bank.
That's past, you're talking past what this is already. That's even option one, right?
Yeah.
Option one, any of that only goes far south, so that cemetery is down.
Yeah, true, it's exactly that, but
Yeah.
the big concern is, especially with the fair, as people are trying to get up and down the hill.
Yeah.
And you're gonna follow the bank, then you're gonna walk 45 in the cemetery then.
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak to an area of town I haven't investigated, so I'll leave that discussion to you all. I will. Do we want, I guess just before we get into that, do we want to try and focus on the project area? I think that's what we're here to discuss.
I want to address what Hank said.
Okay,
If we cut into that bank, we're gonna not only undermine the roadway, for the cemetery, you're gonna undermine current burials in there. You know, yeah, that's how close we are to the edge.
Yeah.
That's not in this slide.
yeah, not part of this project, I think,
No,
just answering,
we're getting.
just answering a question.
Yeah.
Yes. I saw a hand up, yes.
I just wondered, when you were talking about in front of the parsonage and across from the church there, and about possibly losing some parking space, but that's also the food shelf there, too, and, I just, again, wanted to stress, like, I think there'll be quite a bit of parking that'll be lost, for that area right there, which is needed.
Sideline, coming out of my, I should leave the carpet, I think, earlier, he said, you know, see. Anybody coming more than that, I think, halfway out across the road, you can see, the park on it.
Would you see as a potential solution to that, because the parking over here is gonna be maintained, and then we formalize the crossing, that would there be an opportunity, or is parking always full here when people are trying to access?
When there's a lot of church and functions going on, that both areas are used.
The speed limit is probably the number one problem with physical safety. I agree with the idea of trying to make much more walkable town. But none of these alternatives actually put a physical impediment on the speed of the town. I mean, it's all changes are basically wishful thinking. We're hoping that we slow down because we're choking in a little bit. What are the, I mean, are there options for, I mean, I love the idea of reducing the speed limit to 25, but are there options for actually putting in physical impediments to the speed through town?
I'll speak to the first part of your question, which is, so this project was awarded through what's called the V-Trans Bike Ped Program grant. So, all speeding is obviously a very serious issue, but that was not the intent of this study. This study was to look at a walking improvement. The voices have been heard that there's also a speeding problem, just to address this doesn't address speed, that's not the intent of the study, just to put that out. I think we're incorporating it in the way that we can to fulfill the requirements of a bicycle and pedestrian grant from the state. As far as physical impediments, it's a state-owned road. There are opportunities, but there are plenty of ideas, but it is what is the state willing to do? And I mean, I've been on both sides.
I'm sorry, does that also include, the other idea I was thinking of was in-lane bike lanes, you know, painted in-lane bike lanes throughout the country, communities have been using those to slow traffic down with great success without actually taking away like building on people's property. I don't see, like I said, I just don't see any of these, and you started to address that by saying it's the state-owned highway, but none of these include actually slowing traffic down. It's just kind of wishful thinking.
Again, this is not a traffic calming study. So they don't include that because that's not the intent, just like they don't include proposed guard. Just admit that. But could I just finish?
Yes, sir.
But because it's a state-owned road, if they're willing to potentially consider something like a speed table or traffic calming, that would definitely get your slow speeds. I've seen it go very much the other way. We got big trucks, what about ambulances, what about emergency response? Now everybody can get through the village, and so it's a double-edged sword. I've designed a lot of traffic calming, a lot of effective traffic calming, but it's the state has jurisdiction over the roadway, it's really what they're willing to do. And I know there are, growing movement for new policies around speed management on state-owned roadways, because so many villages like yours exist on a state-owned roadway that goes from 50 to 40 to 30 to 40 to 50, and the 40 to 30 doesn't really happen. But it's where the people are living, it's where the people are engaging with the community, it's where people are walking to and from the fair, to the store. But nothing's changing, and so there's a lot less of that. And so I know there are initiatives at the state to try and move forward more intentional speed management through village centers like this, but that is not the intention of this study, but I think we'll note it in the report.
Could it be incorporated as part of it?
All right, do you have some funding for my consulting?
No, that would be outside the scope of grant.
Yes.
As it currently exists, yes.
And okay.
The import is.
We did have a hand over here.
So I just want to make sure I understand. I think that you described these crosswalk points, the sort of pinch points, as a traffic calming measure. Is that right?
Yes.
So in the sense that there is something in front of us that would have that effect, if I
Trying
understood
to
you
address it
correctly.
within the scope of this project, that was what happens.
So that is the effect, not necessarily purpose, but that is
Yes.
an effect of that.
So after local concerns, we obviously heard the same concern about speeding. And we said, well, what could we potentially propose that we know the state reviews any and all concepts? If we put a speed table in these concepts, the state would say, put that out there before you put it in front of the town.
What's a speed table specifically?
Have you ever drove over like a speed hump? So a speed table is a slightly longer version of a speed hump. So it's a little bit less harsh. So it inherently has a lower impact on speed, but it still can generally reduce speeds 5 to 7 miles an hour on average. So if your average speed out here is 35, you're probably gonna get more of an average speed of 30. with something like a speed table. But the reason we didn't show anything like that is because the state reviews these concepts, and if we had shown a speed table or a speed hump, any vertical impediment, the state actually pushed back on even necking this down to the plowing, for the plowing reason next year. So the state has already seen these and say we don't like that, we're not leaving these.
The state gives the traffic officer.
I can't answer that. I think you knew that before you asked. I'm just the engineer. I'm not sure which order it went up here.
So I have a question from the perspective of the choice to place the crosswalk, essentially on your Parsons lawn, rather than, directly in front of the town hall, and maybe it came to the corner of the cemetery. So it would be a double cross, like if you were to cross, or a diagonal cross, whatever that looks like, but placing it closer to the corner of Potash, whether it be that
Yeah.
south corner of Potash as a way to maintain parking. Or like, why there? Rather than if, yeah.
The immediate, the easy answer to that is sight distance. So when you're calling for a crosswalk like this, you need to ensure that there's adequate, what's called stopping sight distance, and I'll try to keep this fairly high level because engineering, but basically, when somebody's traveling at a speed, there are design standards around how long it is gonna take them to react to something in the road, and stop before they hit it.
Right, and so thinking about that, I know many crosswalks in the community have spots where there's a crosswalk, and if I push the button across, lights are gonna flash a ways down the road, letting that oncoming traffic know that someone wants to cross. Is that type of signage part of a project like this, or something that was considered as a way to? Yeah,
If the project were to move into engineering and the engineer of record determined that was a good countermeasure, then it absolutely could be considered part of the project.
I think that from a parking perspective, hearing that impacts church parking, food shelf parking, that kind of access.
It's more time.
Decrease speed,
Yeah.
but also bring down that stopping distance, so it can be moved potentially.
Sorry, you kind of jumped right in when somebody else was talking.
Well, then the other thing that I think about overall with this project, I'm curious, I made the choice to even come here and sit and listen. I've got it in there. How are we gathering information from other members of the community who are not privileged to not be working right now or to not have childcare challenges? How are we gathering big information? What kind of survey, what kind of push has been done to collect information from the community members?
I think I know at a minimum, at least, we've had 2 of these boards up in the community for the last 8 weeks. So at kind of big points of interest, I think that's been one. I'm not sure if there's been any.
And that's the point for starting conversations, but how does that feedback get back to the group working on this? If the boards are on?
Content,
We've encouraged folks for submitting comments back to the town clerk, and they've forwarded it to the project team.
I think we could continue that. I think the intention is now, after folks are here tonight, I mean, I'll have Rita and I will both have our contact information up on the last slide. Jot it down, email both of us, any thoughts you have after the fact. Or just input if you want to share. Rita's been taking notes this whole time. So we're gonna have everything on record, but if there's anything else that comes up later, you're welcome to.
Or share with others that were
Yeah.
unable to come tonight.
Yeah,
This meeting is recorded as well. So Mariah can have access to it and share with others to view.
all right. I think your hand was up, sir.
So alternative two, we haven't talked about that. So there are, yeah, you mentioned like pedestrian, right? I don't think that a wider shared use section there is really very necessary. I think most cyclists that come through town, I agree that the speed needs to be reduced in some way, are fine with riding in the main lane. Probably going about the speed that cars should be going, 15 to 20 miles per hour, no faster than that. I don't think having an expanded shared use sidewalk with pedestrians and bicycles don't need to be on sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering if you can tell me a 6-foot sidewalk that would be there, so will the edge of this, will it be where the existing sidewalk is now, will it be taking out more of people's property, so the edge will I know you spoke about a distance from the center line of the road. Which I assume is probably the edge of where the existing sidewalk is now. They did it the right distance, right?
The road is a lot narrower.
Yeah, potentially. I can't answer that in confidence now, but I would think potentially.
That land would be taken from owners with a new sidewalk with another 3 feet or something like that.
I think the state would seek to do the project within their right of way. And again, if there would be any impacts, I don't think the state would seek to build the sidewalk on private property without, if there would be, then there would be a right of way process. The state always tries to avoid that where it's feasible. Any impacts, these drawings are obviously based off of GIS information, which is geographic information system. It's what the state has, what's available. It's accurate to about 1 to 2 feet. But we're pretty confident that we could build in a sidewalk, maintain parking, and still include enough separation from parking to not impact even in a temporary sense, any private property. This grass belt is obviously also very wide. If we needed to potentially shift it to mitigate even the temporary impact, then I think that could be an option, but that's all future design consideration.
And just a suggestion, to the group, but, maybe just information could have been sent to the landowners where the sidewalk is now. Just so that they were more aware of what this study was and what was going on.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
We still seem kind of dancing on the issue of maintenance and liability of the sidewalks. That should be set forth before anything else is done. The preparation, and also on the crosswalk, the state highway would clear the road crosswalk, but not the crosswalk where you start receiving calls. So the liability and the maintenance is still, that needs to be resolved, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I mean, again, just to study, I think we would, in terms of how that would work its way into the final deliverable of this project, because it would be a noted concern. But when you go into design, engineering, and permitting, there would absolutely be what's called a memorandum of understanding between the state and town on maintenance and all those considerations. Liability, I am not a lawyer. I can't imagine though a sidewalk in state right of way would the adjacent landowner would be at all liable for something that's not part of their property. Again, I'm not an attorney, I'm not here to speak to that, but I think the maintenance would be agreed upon, the project would move forward in engineering design, it wouldn't just be built with no plan for maintenance. The maintenance plan is always part of an engineering project and then permitting it.
So 2 things. First of all, on the liability issue, I mean, it does seem that there is a sidewalk right now, and so to the extent that there's potential liability, I think it probably exists right now with sidewalk that's in worse shape than this would be. But I do think that it's a good question. But getting back to the size of the choke points and loss of parking, and this is sort of asked, but could you legally put a crosswalk in without any choking point? Because it does, I mean, even if you look at this one in front of the Tunbridge Library, it's like the greater risk, I think it's traffic coming from the north. So if you wanted to have a longer point, it would seem to me that you'd want to have it from the north rather than the south. And so if you can have, comparatively small, if you can have a comparatively small choke point in front of the Tunbridge Library, I don't know why you couldn't have sort of an equivalent small one on the other side.
Well, so that was kind of drawn because there's a driveway right here, so we didn't want to at all impact access to that driveway. Somebody here would tie out of that driveway, but we could potentially, again, more of an engineering consideration if it moves into design, we would look at what is the right sizing of those. As far as would these need to be built? No. But you would still need to restrict parking in advance of the crosswalk, because that would be a safety issue. And you would open up the opportunity for someone to park on the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not a great thing. Yes.
6 feet seems to be optimum, but is there? Will there be any advantage to the planning to have an narrower walk, or would that not even?
To have a what? I'm sorry?
Narrower walk.
Does the ADA obligate us to have a 6 foot?
Oh, a narrower walkway.
Put fun in? Okay. sidewalk, and that reducing the width of the walk, would that make any difference in any of?
No. I guess inherently less material is less cost, but, I think it would be a much bigger benefit. It wouldn't be, I think technically speaking, 5 feet is the absolute state minimum for a concrete sidewalk. 6 feet is recommended because then you can actually pass someone if you have a stroller or a wheelchair, which isn't necessarily. Right,
It's broken, so then.
yeah,
I think also to add to your question about a narrower sidewalk. So if the town decides to move forward with whatever alternative and would like to pursue grant funding to build the sidewalk, because the grant is using federal funds, we're gonna need to build it to the ADA like standards of 6
Yep.
feet. So that's kind of you want grant funding to help build your sidewalk, you gotta
follow the rules.
follow the design rules for that, so is the only caveat, so.
But could that be, pulled out of the entire project and say, okay, everything else fits federal standards, whatever, but maybe we want a 5 foot, a little less. And could that part of it just be pulled out because, that, I agree, there's not a, I wouldn't see that there's a lot of problem if somebody has to pull over a little bit. Narrower walking. But anyways, I just wondered that could be, I mean.
That'll be, I think that'll be a
Maybe
question
like-
for, as we get further down the
Yeah.
project. If V-Trans would agree to that.
With the same standards applied to the path, would it need to be 6 feet or 10 feet?
Well, the intention of calling it a shared use path is that it's inherently wider and allows for more shared use by bicyclists.
Or what if it was not a shared use, but just a walking path?
Then it's a sub, I don't know if I'm understanding the question, then it would be just a 6 foot sidewalk?
Instead of a concrete sidewalk, we have.
It's just paved. Just
Are you
different-
asking for like a 6 foot paved?
That. Pardon,
It would still need to be accessible.
it would still need to be 6 feet.
Yes. Yes.
Does this study include, the number of trees that would need to be removed?
That has not been looked at or counted, no, I don't think we counted trees. That's something we can be sensitive to, be advanced.
Be nice to know,
Yes.
what the streets are gonna look like.
Right, anybody else been in here for almost about an hour and a half, so let me send some people's evenings. Any other questions or comments?
The one that's with the
Straw poll.
the straw poll, the unofficial straw poll.
Yeah, one part, sir, final comment or question.
If we, do not some more, where do you go from there?
Oh, I'm getting there, I'm not gonna spoil it for you. So I think it would benefit us just to take kind of a straw poll. Would anybody raise their hand for alternative 2? Right.
Not favorable.
Would you, so we're gonna take a straw poll on
Unofficial.
an unofficial straw poll on no build. Alternative 1, alternative 2, or alternative 3. I'm guessing there's going to be 0 votes. I'm not detecting much of a need for a wider facility here. Great. So if you would vote for no build, no change in your community, no sidewalks, no nothing, please raise your hand.
All right.
Those of you that will vote for alternative one, which again is the concrete sidewalk from Potash Hill to the general store. And alternative three, which is alternative one plus the extension to the north.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so. Told you I wasn't gonna spoil it. Next steps. We're gonna take what we heard here tonight. We are going to work with the project team to arrive at a preferred alternative between those four options, no build, alternative one, alternative two, and alternative three. Something tells me it's not gonna be alternative two. And then from there, we're going to start building our draft report. And so this is basically the final submission. So the final submission material for this project is all of our findings from our outreach and engagement with you all, our investigation into the existing conditions of the site, our development of the alternatives, and our investigation into the potential impacts of those alternatives, permitting requirements, cost estimating, all of that. We would then present that to the select board at a final public meeting, which I believe would be open to the public. And then once we have any final changes or revision requests from the select board and the state, we would prepare that final report and submit that. So with that, I'll leave that up there. Again, my name is Drew Gingras, BHP, joined by Rita here, our NPM. Thank you all for being, thank you all for being respectful tonight. I appreciate the energy. I appreciate the strong opinions. Yeah, this was great. And you guys won the award for the most attended public meeting I've been to all year. If you want to be sensitive, we have one late game.
I'm wondering, when will we be hearing about what this project could, and what the next would be to keep it up and running?
When you hear, well, that information would probably be presented in the final report. We have done conceptual cost estimates for each of these. And those would be used to potentially seek additional grant funding if the project is determined to move forward in design. And then again, the maintenance plan, that would be more of an engineering design permitting agreement, which again, it's kind of for design moves into that, that's when that would be.
Yeah,
determined.
town reliable, like, sidewalk.
Other towns where they
Is the
built.
Plow, sand, consultant.
I think it varies, and that's why I mentioned what's called a memorandum of understanding. I believe that would need to go, an agreement would need to be reached between the town and the state to figure out how we would maintain and potentially build sidewalk.
So we have no select board.
Yeah,
I think we're not looking at spending as a town $500,000. If we got an alternative that we all sort of shut down, I think we would be present. It would be a whole separate process. I understand that, and I think that's something that we have to consider when we get the report back from BHP. And I personally just wanted to say thank you to, first of all, the committee that put all this together, some more energy and Rita, because it was a lot of work. And I think they presented us, and BHP, thank you. I think you guys presented us with three very viable alternatives that actually are quite in line with what was in the town plan. And that's kind of what we want to go back to. What's in the town plan? What are we looking to do for our community? So I think, given the scope of the project, you guys did a wonderful job, so thank you.
Thank you all for being able to come out. I mean, it's one thing for us to present alternatives, but it's also, we need the community feedback on all of them of like, this is gonna work, this is not gonna work. Tweak this part, don't tweak this part. I mean, so that, I mean, this is your study, this is your plan. So thank you for your feedback.
I'll put our contact information back up there, and yeah, again, thank you all for your time, for coming out tonight, and just for, I had this slide up earlier, but just for assigning dates to where we're going from here. We'll spend the next couple months drafting up that scoping report, summarizing all our findings. We would seek out a select board meeting in the fall to wrap up the project before we all sit down for Thanksgiving dinner.
So thank you for your contact information. We will also let you know when that final meeting will take place. So we invite you to come back in, hear what the final report will say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all, and again, thank you for being respectful.
Thank you.
Is there any?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.